We are looking forward to your
Yeah.
presentation. Thanks, and I would like to acknowledge and respect the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we are meeting upon here today, the Ghana people. I acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Ghana people to their place. I also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, people attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia present here. And it's a privilege to have you a short info or bio about Anne. Anne has worked as a consumer advocate in research organization since 2004 and is now the manager of community engagement at Telethon Kids. She was previously head of the Consumer and Community Health Research Network, where she established a strategic framework and program of work for consumers and community involvement across the Western Australia Health Translation Network partner organization, including Telethon Kids, and is a senior consumer representative for Consumer Health Forum of Australia and former chair of Health Consumer Council Western Australia. She serves on key state and national health and research committees. In January 2005, she was appointed as a member of the Order of Australia for significant service to community health through consumer advocacy roles and strategic policy research and development. It's been a pleasure for me to invite Anne. I listened to her talk all through. She's the inspiration for all our consumer representatives, and she's one of the pioneers in this field. And without further ado, let's welcome Anne. Thanks, Anne. I will just...
Thank you very much.
I'm going to pin you there, and you can share your screen now.
It's not letting me share my screen. All I can see is lots and lots of you.
Yep.
Maybe.
Nope.
No, I can't share my screen. So, do you want to just quickly talk me through this?
Shyam, I think you've got to stop sharing yours.
I'm not sharing.
Oh.
No, I think
it's
web viewing and screen. So I think maybe you just need to pick what application you want to share, Anne.
This is all a bit tricky, isn't it? Let me see if I can. Can you see my screen? Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, fabulous. All right, that's great. Okay, look, welcome everybody. I want to talk to you this afternoon about consumer and community involvement in research. And I would like to also pay my respects to the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting on. I'm in Perth and I'm meeting on Noongar lands, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and also to all of the other lands where people are. So I'm going to talk and then at the end there'll be an opportunity for you to have some questions. So it's probably easy when we're doing it this way to let me go through and then answer your questions at the end. So just very quickly about Telethon Kids, they've had almost 2 decades of an organisation-wide consumer involvement, consumer and community involvement strategy. And I believe the key ingredients to this success has been the senior level champions that have actually come on board with this and provided funding for dedicated roles. It's a goal of the Institute's strategic plan, and the board is committed to it. And we have very strong networks and collaborations across the state, across the country, and certainly internationally. And there's a link there to a whole lot of resources that we've developed on the Telethon Kids website. If you go to the our research and then help shape our research, and I'll give you that link again at the end. So I'm going to talk today about consumer involvement from a researcher's perspective and then from a consumer perspective, and I'm going to hopefully be able to share some hints and tips and stories that I've picked up along the way. I have been working in this in roles like this since 2004, And before that, I worked in the Children's Hospital here in Perth as a the parent advocate, actually. And I have a daughter who is 41 now who has a disability, and that set me on this long, hard road to being a consumer advocate. So today I'm talking about consumers and community members working in partnership with researchers, clinicians and students to shape decisions about research priorities, policy and practice. We are only talking about that informing and shaping decisions that happens around research. So what's the difference? And I think this is a really important thing. And some of this stuff, you know, you might all be going, oh, I know all about this. But I think it's really important when you've got mixed audience to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. So these are National Health and Medical Research terminology and definitions. So participation is talking about when people take part in research. And that can be in a range of ways, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about participation. So involvement, as I said, is when the community helps to inform and shape decisions about research. And then engagement is about organisations, a research organisation or a research program, and the community having conversations and activities to be informed about the research. So I think it's really important that as a researcher you be very clear with consumers what's the difference, because these terms are used interchangeably and, you know, different people have different ideas about what they mean. So it's very clear about what involvement is, and you can see I'm not a fan of acronyms, but PI is a way to remember this. So when do you do it? Look, I think all levels and all stages of all health and what you might call social care research, you know, there isn't any research that I don't think I think all research should have consumer input, community input, so that the end users are actually informing what happens and why that research is important to the community, and more importantly, that people will pick up and run with the results of your research or the research that's coming out of your organisation. So why is it important? Picture, if you don't have the people that it is happening, then you have, as researchers or research organisations, you have, you know, a chance of not hitting the spot, so to speak. And Nikki, who is on this call, I heard this quote last year from you, Nikki, and I hope I may have paraphrased it, but I thought it actually says exactly what it is. Having a research project without patients or consumers in it is being included is like throwing a birthday party for someone and then not inviting them. So Nikki, I hope you don't mind me using your quote, but I think it says it as it is. It's about getting that whole picture. So the benefits, there's lots and lots of benefits, but research is relevant and prioritised to what's important to the community. And that is probably the most important thing. There's improved accountability for the use of public money. Much of our health research in this country is funded with taxpayer money, and it's about the transparency and accountability for the use of that money. The community has increased understanding of research, and you couldn't have guessed that we were going to have the community understanding of research that we have now. People understand about clinical trials and about the importance of, you know, doing phase 1 trials and you know, having lots of people in trials. And, you know, there's an understanding about the importance of research that I've not seen in my lifetime before. Having the consumer voice improves the quality of research, and it provides researchers with a unique perspective on people's lived experiences. If a researcher is conducting research and doesn't have the condition or the, have any knowledge of first-hand knowledge of the area that they're researching, as I said, there's an opportunity that you might not hit the right spot. And of course, from the consumer point of view, it empowers people by giving them a voice, by letting them have a voice, not letting them have a voice. That's a really bad way of putting it, but having people have a say and feel valued and important to research is very, very important and very empowering. Whoops, we seem to have gone back to the wrong thing. Sorry about that. So I'm not used to actually doing these myself. So I want to talk a little bit about, that was, to make sure that everyone's thinking the same, on the same page as me. So implementing involvement is, something that is not easy. It takes time, it takes effort, consultation, collaboration, and the ability to work in partnerships with all parties from both sides. So for researchers, I can only say planning is crucial. It's important to ensure the following is in place before beginning involvement activities. I believe to have success, you need a planned, budgeted strategy for involvement activities. And I use the word budgeted because I and the organisations that I've been working in for the past 17 years, we certainly advocate for the payment of consumers and community members for their time and their out-of-pocket expenses. So we are lucky in WA, we have a health department who has an hourly rate set for us, so we just use that. $35 an hour, and sometimes if we've got funds we pay for parking as well. I think it's really important to have that senior level support and sign off. If you are a researcher that's just starting off in your career and you think it's a great idea to involve the community and your supervisor doesn't, there's a problem for you and you may run into difficulties. Making sure you put aside the time to do the involvement activities is really important, exactly the same as all other aspects of your research. To think about training requirements for the team and for any consumers that you're going to be involved. Having a named person responsible for involvement activities is really important. And I don't know about all of you, but I hate it when I'm trying to ring up and I don't have the name of a person, and in all aspects of my life. So I think if you're working with consumers and they've got a query or they're concerned about something, not knowing who to get in touch with is really, can be difficult. And all of this is about building relationships between researchers, clinicians and community. And if you don't have all of the supports in place, your success will be limited. And if you're lucky enough having admin support, sometimes consumers can't print all the documents that you might send them at home. Not everyone can read off a screen. And so, you know, there's a whole lot of things that you might be required to do to support consumers to be involved in your research. So just a few other things for consumers. We've moderated the National Health and Medical Council, Research Council's research cycle. I think it's a lot prettier now in these colours, but that will help you. These are tools that you can use to decide if you're going to involve consumers in all stages of your research and all levels. When you look across at the spectrum of involvement, you can decide where it is you're going to get started, or you might want to show the consumers where it is you're planning on involving them, and they might have some other ideas about where they can help. And moving over to the involvement spectrum, you can see there are 5 different levels that consumers and community members can be involved in, and depending on the research is about where you'll do it. You might look down the other end about leading the research. That's generally for organisations who fund research themselves, and The other thing is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people will often want to lead the research if they are looking to get some research done in their communities. So these are tools, and they are for researchers and consumers to be able to use and see where involvement can happen. So we've developed here in Western Australia a range of methods for involving consumers and community members. And I think for researchers, and I talk about researchers first because they're ultimately the people who has responsibility for the research project. So they're the ones that need to, you know, always be in charge and making sure the research meets, you know, the requirements of what it was funded for. But an important first step in deciding the best method is to ask, will the involvement activities involve one or two consumer or community members? And if so, you might think about having consumer or community reps, research buddies, which is something that I nicked from the UK many years ago. And for lab-based research, they've been a very, very successful model for us, where a researcher is buddied up with a consumer or community member, and they, you know, meet a couple of times a year. It's not such a formal role as the consumer rep role, but equally it can be just as effective. And then, of course, there's community researchers. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see people there with some flip charts for the STOP trial. And the STOP trial is being conducted in the north of Western Australia, and it's see, treat and prevent skin disease in Aboriginal communities in the Kimberley. And they spent 2 years developing the project before it even got started. They consulted with the community. They got community researchers, which were the Aboriginal health workers in the communities that are in the Kimberley, and they consulted about how this could go. And it was a long, slow process. And one of the big things that they did was, you know, people have English as a second or third or even fourth language often. And so the consent forms for taking part in a trial were, you know, just beyond the reading levels, or if there was the literacy levels of the community. So what they did was they developed, in collaboration with the community, flip charts, so that those flip charts could be used as a method of obtaining consent. And so over 2 years was spent with all of this work. And then when they finally got around to starting the first phase of their trial, they very quickly, within, you know, a matter of weeks, signed up over 700 families. So it was well worth it. And they've also developed some guidelines in collaboration with the community about treating scabies in those communities. So, you know, a really successful model that's been working with community researchers. And then, of course, if you want to involve a larger group of people, you might set up a reference group or a steering group or advisory council, and they all have different roles. And the other picture that's there of two researchers, one is the head of the lung team at Telethon Kids Institute, and the other one's a PhD student and a clinician at Perth Children's Hospital. And they met with a community reference group for muscular dystrophy WA, and they were going to have a sleep study, which they would be doing at the hospital, and boys with muscular dystrophy were going to have to come into the hospital and do the sleep study. And when they met with, we had a community conversation, which I facilitated, and they met with a reference group for muscular dystrophy WA at this. Most of the people that were there were from the reference group and that community, of course. And they said, is there any chance you might be able to do the sleep studies in homes? Because it is really very important research that we want to contribute to. But the way of getting the boys into the hospital and all of the hassle that went with that, and, you know, they just felt that it may inhibit them from taking part in this, what they saw as being important research. So what the researchers did, they went away and they had a look at it, and they came back and they're now doing the sleep studies in everybody's home. So that's just an example to show you that having that community voice is so important, because what the researchers were suggesting with every good intention was actually totally impractical for these boys that have huge health issues. So in this, of course, if you want to involve the wider community, you might have a community conversation, which we did with Muscular Dystrophy WA. And that is not a research method where you might think about having a focus group that's taped and is part of your research project. This is before your research project starts. And it's not taped. It's a much safer space for people to come in and feel that they can speak, and it's usually around a distinct topic. And then priority setting partnerships, they are something that we have managed to do, and I know that a priority setting partnership was done for chronic kidney disease some years ago, Nikki and Cheyenne. So moving on, I want to talk now about for consumers, and I think that these are some thoughts that I've had over the years that I've gone back to training we do for research for consumers about being an effective member of the team. So I think it's really, there's 6 things that I would suggest that consumers need to think about. Need to be clear and understand about the research project and its proposed benefits. Everybody wants to know what's in it for me. If I'm going to contribute, what is it? And it may not be something that's going to directly impact on me, but it may impact on my family in the future, or, you know, even my grandchildren or whatever. People don't have to be tied to thinking it has to be only about me right now. But I think it's important that you understand what that is and what is the commitment required from you. If you are unwell, you know, that might impact on whether you can be involved. So does the project interest you? If you're not interested in the research topic, it's unlikely that you're going to contribute meaningfully. So do you have, sorry, there's something missing there. Do you have the time to do what is expected? Are you well enough? Can you contribute? Researchers are great at planning meetings in work times. That may not work for you. So I think it's really important that you understand what is expected of you, and to you know, make sure you know and you be upfront about it. And I'm very much into supporting consumers to be able to speak honestly and openly, and to talk about your needs for training or support requirements. And they might be, you know, all sorts of things that you need. And then, of course, there's the payment for out-of-pocket expenses and time. I think, as I said, we certainly advocate for payment for consumer and community involvement. It's about respecting that the contribution that consumers make. So I think it's very important to say, you know, I'm going to need my whatever covered, and do you offer any payment for time? So what are the barriers to you being meaningfully involved in a project? And, you know, they can be all sorts of things. As I said, you might not have the time, you might not be able to get into meetings, although in the last year we've all discovered the big delights of Zoom. So they are barriers that, you know, researchers have worked fabulously to get that happening. So if there's any conflicts of interest, and they may be perceived or real, but you need to put them on the table and say, this might be a problem, I may not be able to be involved because of. I think it's really important to create win-win situations with researchers. And I say this because I've been a health consumer advocate myself for many, many years. And I think I'm not adversarial. I'm very work from a cracked record point of view. In other words, I don't move off message. The consumer voice is important and will add value to the research or the health service area that's being developed. But I think by not being adversarial and looking for win-win, and you know, sometimes you've got to give over a little bit, but you know, not give over everything, but you've got to actually be prepared to, you know, think, well, I didn't win that bit, but certainly this is the big picture, and that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for the battle, winning the battle, but the war. So I use those words very deliberately, because I've found over the years that I've seen, you know, consumers and community members come into this sort of thing and be very adversarial, and in actual fact, that's like a bucket of cold water over someone who's starting and wants to get your involvement happening. The other thing is about using your story or experiences effectively. When some years ago, I was the chair of the Health Consumers Council here in Western Australia, and they used to they had a program of providing consumers to government health department committees. And so what we used to do was survey the chairs of those committees. And every year we got back the same results. And I was the chair for 6 years and a board member for a further 3. So over those 9 years, every year we got back the same thing, was about consumers banging on about their story. And you know, I think it's really important to remember that whatever it is that gets you into being a consumer rep or being part of a research team, that's great and very important. But I think you've got to use it wisely. And I'm sure we've all been in a room where someone keeps talking about something that happened to them 20 years ago, and you think, well, for goodness sake, yeah, okay, it's time to move on. So I think there are times when you can use your lived experience, your own personal lived experience, to bring home a point. But I think as a consumer rep, it's really important to recognise that you're there to bring a broader perspective rather than your own particular health issues or problems or concerns you might have. So I say those things, you know, from the point of view that, you know, they're things that I've seen myself and experienced and learnt. And I, you know, just said at the beginning of this that I'm the mother of a 41-year-old daughter who has a disability, and she'd be horrified if she thought I was still talking about her. But, you know, I think it's, I say it because it's important for people to understand that, you know, I sort of have lived experience of being a consumer advocate myself. So some further tips to support meaningful involvement. Ethics approval is not required for involvement activities. And I say this to both consumers and researchers on the call, that if you are going to add a biostatistician, or a biostatistician is being added to a research team, you don't get ethics approval. And having a consumer or community member as part of the research team is exactly the same. You do not need ethics approval. You may require ethics approval for community researchers, but that's part of the research plan. But to inform and develop a research project and to provide oversight while it's being conducted, and then helping to get the results out to the community and to the policymakers, you do not need ethics approval. Involvement activities are best developed in partnerships between consumers and researchers developing projects and then expecting consumers to say, yeah, this is a great idea without any input is probably unrealistic, and often can have a detrimental effect. We did see the public health messaging to various communities in Victoria not having proper information in languages they could understand. The dire results from that was really important. And someone just the other day, we were doing a training workshop with someone from New Zealand, and she said that their public health messaging was done in total consultation with Maori communities. And so they haven't had, and maybe they weren't going to anyway, but they saw the other side of that and how positive it is. So that partnership is crucial to everything that you do. I think if you're advertising involvement activities, whether you're a researcher or whether you're a consumer helping a researcher, it's good to have a role statement, what it is you expect of people. If you're going to have a lot of people apply, you might want to have some selection criteria and an application form. Information about the organisation or the research program is really important. People want to know what they're getting into, and of course the plain language summary, and that is often a really great starting point for consumers and researchers to work together about it. I've talked about budget. This is the third time I've mentioned it, but I think it's really important. It costs money. It is an extra impost on your time, but I've got to tell you that whilst there's no line item for it in either the National Health and Medical Research Council or the Medical Research Future Fund grants, they both assure me that they do not cut out budgets for consumer and community involvement. In actual fact, if you've got a budget in there and it's part of that planned budgeted strategy I talked about, you would show someone that's reviewing it that you're serious about your involvement activities. And then, of course, plan regular meetings and updates on the progress of the research. And that's from both sides. So if you're a researcher, you might suggest, well, you're my research buddy and let's meet twice a year so I can bring you up to date. Great for laboratory researchers. And if you are a consumer, ask when we're going to meet again. So I think, as I said, it's all about that relationship that's really important. So just quickly, I'm not sure how I'm going on time. I think I've got a few more minutes. I just want to share with you some more good practice examples, just a few from here in Western Australia. I'm sure there's lots and lots of examples across Australia, and particularly in the kidney area, the kidney disease area, where they've just gone, you know, zooming along in the few years that I've been involved with Jonathan Craig and the various teams across Australia. So the Participate project in Perth Children's Hospital in the rehab area, it was a project of 5 studies where they aimed to facilitate kids with CP to participate in community-based sporting activities. And these were kids with CP and acquired brain injury, so they had accidents or whatever. And studies were guided by a steering group of parents, young people, clinicians and service providers. And, you know, it's really successful. And the model that they used, it was part of a PhD project, and they went off to Sweden and presented about it and got an award in Sweden for involvement. And those 2 quotes there are from parents that were part of it, and one of them was a mother saying she was really surprised that they were interested in what she had to say, and the other one was, you know, fabulous about, you know, being involved, and so that if the boys were there with their big brothers or little brothers or whatever, they can take part. And that was, you know, a really successful partnership of researchers, clinicians and the community working together. So the next one is a very recent one, a reference group or a community advisory group that I established last year in March. I was very concerned that rapid research was being done, except out of the University of Sydney by the lovely Alison Tong, who did COVID research with consumer involvement from across the world. But other research had little or no involvement in it, and even out of my own organisation where we tout that we have, you know, good practice models. So anyway, on a weekend, I rang people from across Australia and said, do you want to be part? I'm setting this up. We've got no money. I know I always say you have to get paid, but what do you think, guys? And everybody sort of said, oh, I don't care about the money. I just want to contribute. And so we ended up with 22 people. there were 15 people from Western Australia. That's just the way that it worked out, because the bulk of the research that we commented on was Western Australian. We had someone from Queensland, 3 people from New South Wales, someone from ACT, Victoria and Tasmania. And unfortunately, the middle states weren't able to contribute effectively in the meetings because of personal reasons around the COVID time. But, you know, this group was amazing. They came together. We did eventually get money to pay everybody, so everybody was certainly recompensed for the time and effort. We had input into 20 projects, local, national and international. And there were a range of projects, clinical trials, lab-based research, mental health and health promotion. That was an international project. And they did tasks around like ethics and grant applications, study protocols, consent and patient information, data collection, storage and secondary use, because a lot of people were signing up to be part of research for COVID research. But what was going to happen in the future when all of these samples were there? So they held, and of course the dissemination of results from the studies, and quite a few studies out of New South Wales and Victoria. But very exciting that, you know, this group came together. We had 12 virtual meetings, and you can see there that that's one of them where everybody was actually smiling because we told them to. They did hundreds of emails out of session and provided feedback. It was just incredible. I can't believe how engaged everybody was. And they did over 500 hours of work between them, and just, it was really fantastic. And then done presentations at national and international webinars, conferences, and had input into various submissions about how successful it was and how much the community wanted to have a voice in what was going on. So, and they were very senior consumers from across Australia. Normally, I wouldn't suggest ringing people on a Saturday, but most of these were people that I've known and worked with for many years. Lastly, I just want to tell you about a Living Longer priority setting project, and I know that there's one being done for chronic kidney disease, but this is one that we did a little bit different in 2018. We were approached to do a priority setting about people that were living longer. Once upon a time, people used to, you know, finish their working life and then die basically very soon afterwards. Well, that's certainly not happening now, and people are living much longer. Unfortunately, the research is only about being sick and finances, by and large. So they wanted to look and see if there were other issues that communities were facing. So we did a survey, researchers themed it, and we held a workshop, and that's at the top of the one with the Western Australian flag there, where 21 people came, and they said, you know, look, we're really happy to give you our priorities for future research in this area, but we don't feel we're reflective of the Western Australian community. We're all white, middle class, mainly self-funded retirees, and perhaps other people might have different things to say. So we went back and we held 2 more workshops, and they are, you can see by the flags, the various communities that came to those 2 workshops. It was very difficult because we didn't have money for as many interpreters as what we could, but we managed and we modified it, and you know, people from the Afghan and where were they from? They were from various Middle Eastern communities, Afghan, Iranian and Iraqi communities. They thought it was such a fabulous thing to be taking part in. They were texting their friends, so we ended up with 10 more people during the course of the day than we'd planned for. But, you know, it was really fantastic. We ended up with 6 lists of priorities from the different communities, and we grouped some of those communities together just for ease, because there was, you know, not much else we could do. And with the different priorities, there were only 2 priorities that were common across the board for all of them. So I think it's really important for policymakers to know that if they were putting in a generic policy and only, you know, a very small proportion of the community is actually going to benefit from that policy, you know, it's really important to speak to other groups of the community as well. And the other thing that was really stood out for me was these people from the range of the communities that there have said, we have never, ever been asked before about anything. So that was really, you know, some important learnings for us, and in future we'd certainly be looking for funding around having appropriate interpreters, because that made it really hard. And then that's it from me, everybody. So thank you. There is my contact details, and we can share those. But I think the cartoons that I've had in there from the Involve organisation in the UK, and they actually say it exactly, you know, how it is. Why would you go up Everest without a Sherpa? Why do research without consumer involvement? So thank you very much. And now I'm going to try and stop sharing my screen. Wow, look at that. Brought us all back.
Thanks, Anne. That was lovely presentation. I heard it like, I know how hard for you to present a 4-day workshop in a 40-minute session. But you did it so beautifully. I think I'll open the forum to ask any questions or comments or feedback. Yeah. And your camera is a bit off, is it? We are not able to see your
My camera?
Yeah.
I don't know why. I'm staring straight at it, so it shouldn't be. So when you say it's a bit off, what is happening?
Oh, we can see your name, just that's it. We can't see your face, yeah.
Let me see if I can pull it up. No, I don't know where you've all disappeared to. I've got no idea. Well, that's a bit of a worry. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I can't see any of you now. I've managed to make you disappear. So I might just quickly come back. Oh, no, I won't. I don't know where you all are. So I've done something. I'm not very techno. Anyway, I can take questions because you can hear me and I can hear you.
Yep. If you have any question, just unmute your mic and ask Anne directly. Yeah.
Does that mean nobody's got any questions?
Go, Ellen. Ellen's unmuted.
Oh, it's a bit left of field, but I was just wondering, Anne, if you had engaged much with, I guess, other outside of medical research in terms of some of your engagement methodology, because just hearing you speak reminds me a lot of some of the reciprocal research methods that UNSW practices, and I was just interested if you had heard about them or sort of engaged with anyone in terms of documenting your methodology.
I haven't actually. It's really interesting because I've just this last week. I'm really annoyed I can't see you all. Do you all mind if I just go in and come back?
Sure.
I find it really difficult. So if that is that all right with you, Sherm?
Yeah. It's all good.
I'd rather do that than talk to nowhere. I don't know what I've done, but I'm going to come back. So I'll see you in a minute.
Yep.
Thanks, Anne. Rubbish. The era of Zoom.
She's still there. Is she? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
She's YouTube. I think it was great just to be reiterated about it. Like, I've heard different stuff, but it was so good. There's always something comes out, and I think it was great that for me it was around the whole pulling people together and just, yeah, how she was able to do that with COVID, that you can actually do that, and the willingness. Oh, she's back. Yes.
You're on
And you
mute
are just
though
muted,
now.
yeah. Can you please unmute?
Unmute.
Yep.
You know, worked hard to put down, you know, and sort of share properly. Not for a lot of years. Some years ago, my colleague from the UK, Beck Hanley, and I wrote a book called The Green Book, and then that's on the website. And then we wrote and the next one about involving consumers. But I last week finished working as the manager at Telethon Kids Institute, and I'm just going to be doing some project work for the next couple of months. And interestingly enough, quite a lot of people have said to me, now you need to actually write down what you've been doing so that it can be shared. But I'm not a researcher, I'm not a writer, I just want to wax lyrical. So maybe, you know, maybe if you've got some people that I could get in touch with, I'd be really interested to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to link you up, because I think in a prior life, I did my master's in international development, and looking at sort of human rights-based design of community-based projects, and one of the methodologies they use is reciprocal research methods.
Yeah.
And I think what you've articulated is very similar to that methodology, and yes, there's a couple of people I'd be happy to hook you up with.
That'd be fabulous, because I think I was talking to someone in England the other night, and he just said, you know, you need to actually get it on paper so other people can share it, because there's a lot of stories and a lot of information, and you know, I sort of thought, oh, I don't know who'll be interested. Nikki is, but you know. Anyway, we've got time to nick around the room. So Tamara, did you have something to ask? Say, you're on mute. You need to unmute.
Unmute. Yep. No, that was actually great to listen to. Now, I am actually a researcher, but I'm not in the kidney field. I'm also in the lung and the lysosomal storage disorders field. So I'm just completing my PhD at the moment. And the reason I'm involved is one of my sons has actually had a kidney transplant about 3 years ago, which is going really, really well. So yeah, just hearing this all in a package, yeah, is great. Yeah, it's great. And seeing both sort of sides of where everything comes from.
Great.
So thank you. Yeah, much appreciated.
Amanda, did you have anything you wanted to say? Or
I wanted to say, firstly, thanks so much. I know you by reputation, Anne, so it was a real pleasure to finally hear you speak. I've worked as a researcher. I now sort of work more so in research governance for a not-for-profit organisation, and I also have a child who had a kidney transplant a couple of years ago, so I'm part of the Centre for Kidney Research family now. One of the things that I do in my work is that we try to link researchers and policy agencies. Mm-hmm. And so consumers are quite often left out of that conversation. What I found really refreshing today was hear you talk about consumer involvement. I think sometimes when I speak to researchers, they get caught up in, you know, what part of involvement are we talking about? Is it production? Is it creation? Is it design? So, you know, that sort of, we spend more time talking about language than we do actually about going about and doing it. And I think similarly with policy agencies, how we link researchers and policy agencies together, it's all a bit fraught. So my takeaway from you was you just need to be really pragmatic. You need to say, all right, this is what we want, and let's go about doing it where there is, as you described, a win-win situation. So thank you so much. Really appreciate the time that you've given us today. Thank you.
My pleasure. So, Janice, did you have anything you wanted to add, say?
Only to say thank you very much. It's kind of awe-inspiring for me, because I'm probably your end product consumer that you've been talking about, and because I have PKD, my mother and aunts had PKD, my daughter has PKD. So we're often looking to kind of how do we support others in our community. We have a support group here I'm in the Illawarra. So Helen Coonan contacted me the other day and asked if I could pop on just to get some information. So that part's been very helpful, just listening to the sides that you're presenting, which I rarely don't see. I don't see that side. So, you know, we're here, we're trying to just support the researchers in a way, and our community with illness.
Fabulous. You know, the end product, I think I called you the end users, but I'm going to actually start using the term the end product. I love it. Like quoting Nikki's birthday party stuff. Carmel, I can't see you, but have you got anything you'd like to say to us? No, maybe Carmel's gone. No, there you go. Are you there, Carmel? No. Oh, well. Look, I think, Nikki, I didn't ask you. Do you want to say anything?
I think for me, it's actually like, this is the first time I've actually heard you talk about it, like for a longer period of time, because I've been a bit spoiled, because I kind of came in with Jonathan and Alison and all these beautiful, all the things you've said are all the things that were set up for me. And, you know, I had a buddy, I got paid. I was very lucky to be one of the first people put on as one of the consumers on that. So for me, it was kind of like it was you reiterating my journey. And I guess the only thing I kind of have to say is there's all that stuff, but that this process can actually be life-changing. And for me, it has been, you know, it's really this whole process and the people that have supported that process has really changed my life. So going from somebody who was on dialysis and having a transplant, working as a physio, but feeling very fulfilled. 2.5 years ago, I meet Jonathan Craig. I give a little chat, and my life has kind of, now I'm got a year to go in my PhD, and I can kind of start doing research that I always wanted to do, and sort of encouraging other consumers. So I think the thing you left off is that, you know, this process can actually be life-changing, and that, you know, for the researchers as well, because Talia, who you know, is one of my best friends now. We're like sisters, we're like from other mothers, we're just connected. So I think there's all that you say, but there's also more that surrounds it. That's the amazing people you meet, I think.
And I think, you know, when I'm looking back now at, you know, what's been happening for me, you know, people like Jonathan Craig, and this is why I talk about those senior level champions who actually make it happen. And I don't know if all of you or any of you other than Nikki know Jonathan, but, you know, he's an amazing man who just makes things happen. So, and likewise with Alison Tong, same thing. So I think, you know, we're all very lucky to know people like that. So are we time? We've got 3 more minutes.
Yeah, thanks. And I think I'm from the same field as Nikki. I think I finished my PhD, but then I had my transplant and kidney disease, and I looked into the gap in the communication between the researcher and consumers. That's inspired me, and people, your work and Nikki's work inspired me to be in this space. So I think you guys inspire us each other to strive forward with consumer engagement, not only in Australia, but also internationally, because we work with other groups like Canadian groups are doing really well in kidney research, same UK Involve group, and your talk with Beck Hanley on the workshop is really good. The 4-day workshop, how to do this on with all these learning materials with ACTA. So I think it's great for us to have you today. And then if I get everyone's permission, I can spread this message or put it on our YouTube channel, the BEAT-CKD, which is what Jonathan Craig initially started in 2016 with a 10 million funding to have consumer priorities involved in throughout the research cycle in kidney space. I think that started a whole paradigm shift in how to involve consumers in kidney research. And as you said, like now we are in the forefront in terms of involving consumers, not only as a tokenistic approach, but also empowering consumers like me, like Nikki, leading projects as an end user and also as a front runner in leading the research. I think you're an inspiration, you're a role model for all of us. And thank you so much.
That's enough. Got that.
Thank you so much.
It's lovely to meet you. I'll send you a copy of my slides with no mistakes in it, please. So, all right, lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing? One more thing before we go.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, just to butt in. Can I say as one of the end things, it's we are forever grateful to people like yourselves that are doing the researching and that are working for us, not just for us, but for my daughter and others that are going on. So we're very grateful to everything that you're trying to do for us. So thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure. You don't have to be grateful, you deserve it. Goodbye, everyone. Have a nice night.
And thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Lovely to meet you, Janice and Tamara. And good to see you, Ellen.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Amanda
Bye.
and Sham, always.
Bye.
Stay well, everyone.